We'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the NCAE Black Caucus and our community conversation tonight when we talk about adultification bias. I'm Lawrence Brinson, chair of the NCAE Black Caucus, as well as NEA facilitator for Just Schools. Tonight, we have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful group of panelists, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves in their own way. And we're just going to go ahead and get started with this conversation tonight. We are so grateful for the panelists tonight, and we're going to go ahead and get started.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Jamelia Blake, and I'm going to share my screen with you all today, which sets up and introduces myself a little bit. So I'm a licensed psychologist. I'm a professor at Texas A&M University. I'm also the lead researcher and the developer of adultification bias. And you might be familiar with the report Girlhood Interrupted, or listening to Black Women and Girls that was released with collaborators from Georgetown Law Center. But the concept was my own baby. And I here want to talk about that concept a little bit more. I'm also the developer of Excel, a culturally responsive classroom behavior management training that, among other things, helps teachers with addressing adultification bias. So let's start off really simple, something that we know, school to prison pipeline, right, as a visual. We know what it is, we know it's happening. I think the challenge is that we didn't realize the extent to which it was happening to Black girls and the over-disciplining of Black girls. And this is something that I struggled with as a researcher, as a Black woman, as a Black mother, because, you know, I was always taught and believed Black girls are doing all right. Black women are doing all right. We're academically excelling. We have great jobs. We're making tons of money. That tons of money is debatable, but anyway, depends on what city you live and what you do. But that was really what I believed in my graduate training and my own experience, because that's what I was told. And when I dug deeper, what I really found is what I call was hiding in plain sight, that Black girls were being over-suspended and over-disciplined. And that just really did not jive with the perception we have of girls in general. Girls are not having behavior problems. Girls are not acting out. So when I started looking into the discipline disparities research, I started this back in 2009. I was really shocked to find that Black girls are over-disciplined, but I couldn't figure out why. Why are these girls who are academically excelling, who are doing well, why would they be suspended at such high rates? And what really occurred to me is that the stereotypes of Black women were being mapped onto Black girls. And that Black girls weren't seen as children, but instead being viewed subconsciously as Black women. And so the stereotypes of the Jezebel, right, over hypersexualized, the sapphire, angry Black woman, aggressive, those stereotypes were being mapped on to really benign and developmentally appropriate behavior. And that's where I came up with this idea of adultification bias, that many educators, many social service agents, when they were interacting with Black girls, they were seeing them through the lens of Black women. And some of these individuals were attempting to protect and control, and some of these women, individuals were attempting to overcorrect and discipline. So what we did, and what I designed, was a study to see how adults really view Black girls. And if Black girls were afforded the same opportunities or characteristics that we afford to all children in childhood, right? And so we asked individuals from across demographics, adults, different professions, how much do you believe Black girls or Black females need to be supported? How much do you feel that Black girls need to be comforted, right? Some of the things that are very much characteristic to childhood. What we would expect if there wasn't a bias, that no matter what the race of the child is or adolescent, that the individuals completing the survey would say, of course a child needs to be comforted. Of course a child needs to be supported, right? And then we started to tap into the stereotype about hypersexualization. How knowledgeable are Black girls about sex? And the idea that something that we suffer from a stereotype of Black women is that we are super women, that we are super independent. And so that then shields us from the need to be nurtured and taken care of. So how independent are Black girls? And what we did is we asked individuals, not just educators, to complete this survey about girls of different age ranges, right? And the results are, problematic, right? You've heard about this often, hopefully in the media, but what we did is we asked I keep saying educators because we're on a train with educators, but we asked individuals about this from ages 0 to 4 girls, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, and 15 to 19. And when I originally designed this survey, what I really expected was, okay, between ages 15 and 19, you're going to think that girls are more adult-like, because they should be. They're approaching adolescence. They're trying to establish their independence. I really thought that was going to happen. We included infancy to 4 years old because those questions don't make sense. You wouldn't expect the infant to know anything about sex or to not need to be cared for. And what we found is that by the age of 5 years old, Black girls were seen as being more adult-like. That individuals were viewing them, and they did have this adultification bias. And then we saw that it was even higher from ages 10 to 14. Again, not needing to be comforted, not needing to be protected. And so what this work really did is shed light on the experience that so many Black women and girls have shared with me through their follow-up work, where they have come to say, this explains exactly what I went through. This explains why, I wasn't given the benefit of the doubt, why people were always looking at me as being problematic, why I would make a mistake and people would say, you're supposed to know better. My 16-year-old talks to me all the time about, Mom, can I just live? Can I just be free? And unfortunately I say, no, you can't, because people are looking at you through a lens. You're not afforded those same opportunities to make mistakes. You're not allowed to go yelling in the mall, carelessly ripping and running with your friends, because the outcome is going to be greater when you're pulled over by mall security, right? Because of this adultification bias that we all have, right? We don't view Black girls in developmentally appropriate lenses. And that seeps out, it bleeds out in the way that we educate them, it bleeds out in the way that we discipline them, and it bleeds out in the way that their contact with different systems in our country and how punitive we are to responding to their needs. And so these are just some quotes from, and I won't read them to you, from Black women and girls, because one thing about adultification bias that I want to correct is that there's a difference between adultification bias and adultification socialization, right? So I'm a proud single parent, have 2 daughters, one's 18, one's about to be 16. I just say she's 16. And growing up, they had to help fold laundries and wash clothes and do the dishes and help out with dinner if mom was working hard. And that was a part of a socialization process. And even today, my daughter says, you always start off these stories like, well, when I die, you'll know how to do this. But I'm preparing you for life, right? I'm preparing you for being an adult. And in some families, single parent families, Black families, working class families, children assume more household responsibilities. Because that's a socialization process, and also that helps out the family. That's not what I'm talking about when I talk about adultification bias. When I'm talking about adultification bias, I'm saying without knowing anything about these children, without knowing anything about their circumstance, just seeing a Black girl, you are making assumptions, whether you explicitly recognize it or not, about who she is, what she's doing in that meaning, because you're mapping stereotypes. How many times, for those of us who are from the Black community, oh, she fast. The way she's talking, who she's hanging out with, oh, she's fast, she thinks she's grown, right? That's part of that adultification bias. Instead of saying, okay, she's just a teenager. And this is what teenagers do. They test boundaries. They look for independence. We pathologize that, particularly among Black girls, because of this adultification bias that we've all been exposed to and internalized in some way, shape, or form. So I want to be really conscious, and I'm delighted to hear from my colleagues about what they want to share about this topic, but I want to leave you with a few resources. As I mentioned, this is a report that I think is really salient listening to Black women and girls. I think it's very important that we give the women and girls in our community voice to what they're experiencing, because they're going to be pivotal to how we change and identify solutions. And I think my colleagues are going to echo that. The second thing is that I've, of course, as a psychologist and professor, have, textbooks on how we provide psychological services in culturally competent ways to children. But what I'm most proud of and interested in, and definitely looking for partners, is really the solutions. And for educators, how do we go into classrooms and exhibit culturally responsive classroom behavior management? And in that process, addressing adultification bias as well as other educational disparities. And so this is an online training that I've developed with my team for educators that really speak to that point. So with that, I'd like to end my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have in the chat, but I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Benson. She is ready. There she is. All right. Well, thank y'all so much for the time, and I'll be available to answer any questions that you have.
So Dr. Blake, thank you so much for just your work and for presenting and sharing and for really giving language to something I think all of us have known as present, but I think it speaks to the power of quantifying and naming and publishing about these things so that we can point to them in the various roles that we play. So really happy to be here tonight and speak with you all about this issue. And you've heard from, the true expert. I see my role as a psychiatrist and as a forensic psychiatrist and court consultant as really taking this information from experts like Dr. Blake and using that to advocate for our children in these various systems. And so, often in the discussion of adultification bias, there's more of a focus on sort of that school to prison pipeline and kids not being given the benefit of the doubt, which is a really important conversation to have. Where I most recently ended up quoting her work was as it relates to the protection of Black girls, which is also a really important area. There's this narrative that is really popular about resilience, right? And resilience is a good thing. And I don't want to sound as if I'm anti-resilient, but when you have white people in power who want to focus on resilience all the time, that should make you curious, right? Because rather than decreasing the trauma and protecting the children in the first place, they put the burden on the child to be resilient and to respond to that trauma in a way that is appropriate and that doesn't make them feel guilty, right? So be careful of that word. And I would encourage all of you in the circles you're in to ask why we're not talking about protection and trauma prevention and structural and family supports and changes that would allow for all of our children, including our Black girls, to grow up in environments where they're not encountering racism, discrimination, being shuttled in the school to prison pipeline, and all of the other things that they encounter, both as women and as Black people in a racist and sexist, and also if they're, dark-skinned, colorist society, right? So I'm really curious in the back and forth and in the conversation, but I think that that's the main point that I wanted to get across. And also, I really loved Dr. Blake's comments that sort of brought it home, right? This is not just something that white people do to our girls, it's something that we do to our girls. It's embedded in the language we often use to describe our cousins and nieces and daughters and the people in the neighborhood. So being mindful of not being an instrument of that ourselves as we're talking about them, and thinking about how old they really are and what we should really be expecting of them, and how there are ways that we can unwittingly perpetuate some of those things against our girls ourselves, and that as people who are members of those communities, of those families, even though we may not have the power on a structural level in the larger society, our words carry weight. And our words are internalized by our girls in a different kind of way. And so, often the focus is on the power that we don't have, but I think that sometimes, especially when it comes to adolescent girls, adults underestimate how meaningful and impactful, good or bad, your words can be for them, especially in a society where they're getting all of these other messages. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Tanji Reese, who's the founder and executive director at 1124.
Thank you. I like the doctor in front of my name. You all make me feel good. Thank you for that. I'm not a doctor yet, but hopefully one day. Hi, everyone. My name is Tanji Reese, and I'm the founder of 1124. And I just am so grateful to be in this space with you all, to learn from you, and to hear, again, how we can be parts of the solution. So 1124 is an organization that centers prevention education for young people and caring adults through a lens of liberation and community. I've been a prevention educator for 10 years in September. And in my work, I encourage prevention educators and advocates to center the experiences of Black girls and other young people living in the margins. So I spent a significant amount of time in schools doing prevention education work, but it never seemed to reach all students. A lot of the work I did were in predominantly white spaces, but when I used the same curriculum and went to schools that were predominantly Black, there was really no crossover, and it really didn't feel relatable to the students. So most of the content and curriculum that is available to the masses is fairly centered in whiteness, and does not speak to the cultural experiences of Black students, but it also does not bring about thoughts and understanding about socialization from an intersectional lens. So during my master's program, I did some research on prevention programs and effectiveness, and if there were alternative methods. So we see a lot of violence starts in school. This is where young people are experiencing abusive relationships and sexual violence, and it's a lot harder to find safety. So I explore where else can we promote and show violence prevention, and that included mentor programs, family discussions, and also learning from their peers. So I remember specifically working in one school, and they invited us in because they had a group of troubled girls who they feared at risk for sexual violence. So their assumption was that we would come in and teach them how not to be assaulted and how not to be abused. But instead, we created a space for them to have discussion and to feel liberated in that space. We talked about socialization. We talked about pressure and the oppressions they were facing in school. And we also affirm their identities and their experience. For example, around that same time, there was a girl who was, three students who were in school in a stairwell. They were caught having sex. It was two boys and a girl, and the girl was expelled because she was performing oral sex. And the students in our group told us a whole different story. They told us that she was coerced into it, but the school didn't believe her because she was one of those at-risk girls. And she was one of the girls they considered to be fast and luring in boys. So what we saw is that they had a different perception than the school administrative staff had, and they still needed that space that we were creating, but it wasn't for the same reasons that they thought. Around that same time, I was also holding a group at a juvenile justice center for girls who were sexually assaulted. 90% of them were, first of all, Black girls, and they were also there for incorrigibility, which is basically like being bad, truancy, and running away. So it felt like I was seeing the school to prison pipeline up close, and these groups were on the same day. So in the morning, I had the girls in high school, and in the evening, I was working with the girls in the detention center, and the stories were almost identical. So it felt like we're hearing countless stories about them not having body autonomy, and what we did was center identity affirmation. And that allow us to promote that personal agency or their ability to have self-control and over accountability over their thoughts, feelings, and actions. We also created some space for belonging and acceptance, recognized their values, their beliefs, and gave them space to promote their culture so that they didn't feel like there was harm in their Blackness. A lot of times in prevention, we look at risk and protective factors, and a lot of those risk and protective factors are things like racism, or people will say like being Black, being young, being from urban areas, being low income, when really it's those systems that create the risk. So what we did was promote that space and say, this is who you are, and it's okay, and it's accepted, and it belongs here. So when we confirm, we are able to make them feel like they can be a part of community in a safe way. So that's what my work at 1124 is. My focus is a lot on educating caring adults, and that's personal and professional. So if we keep putting that prevention responsibility on young people, especially Black girls, it sends a message that they are the problem. That the reason why Black girls are at the highest risk for sexual violence is because of their Blackness, when really it is because of the adultification bias and them internalizing those messages they're receiving. So Black girls do experience more violence, and they also experience that racism and sexism overlapping. And my focus on adultification bias of Black girls comes from knowing that sexual and interpersonal violence is rooted in socialization. So thank you, Dr. Blake, for making that distinction between the bias and the socialization, because it is different. But they do intertwine with each other. And those stereotypes and those misconceptions can only be addressed with a community liberation approach. That means that they have to engage in self-liberation, yes, to feel good and feel empowered, but it's not going to matter if people are still holding them to standards that they can never fit into or beliefs they can never fit into. So through 1124, I hope to continue to educate caring adults and create those safe spaces for young people. Currently, I provide a support group for girls ages 16 to 24 in Detroit, Black girls, and that's through Sasha Center, which is a program that is for sexual assault survivors, Black women, sexual assault survivors. I'm also right now hosting a 4-part series called Summer of Sister Love with colleague Von Keisha, and we're looking at sisterhood as a form of prevention. So how do we move past these beliefs that girls and women are supposed to be combative with each other and always constantly fighting each other? How do we move past that and move towards a place where we're listening and supporting each other? So thank you all, and please follow me on Instagram. I'll put it in the chat box. Subscribe to my newsletter, visit 1124. I have resources specifically for people who are interested in doing prevention education work in an alternative way. I have a Spotify playlist that I use for music literacy, books that people can read to promote identity, but also like a relationship workbook that young people can work through to discuss things like boundaries. So thank you all. And now I'll pass it to Dr. Elliott.
Wow. So listen, I'm writing all these notes down, and I see you're in Detroit. You're close to Pittsburgh, so we're going to have to collaborate very soon. I'm Dr. Kathy Elliott. I'm the CEO of Gwen's Girls, and we are the convener of the Black Girls Equity Alliance. Gwen's Girls was founded in 2002 by my mother, the late Commander Gwen Elliott. She was a police officer here in the city of Pittsburgh. She was in the first class of women. And during her tenure, she came across a lot of families and women and girls that needed additional support. She was the commander of Youth and Missing Persons, and oftentimes girls that either ran away, and back then we didn't call it trafficking. They were considered like prostituting and all these, again, adultifying terms that actually assume that these young people, these young girls are making the choice to live that type of lifestyle. But in reality, once you start to have these conversations and understand fully what's going on with these young people, it is much more than them just, them being fast, as Dr. Blake talks about. So Gwen's Girls, we currently, again, are in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. We have 3 program sites, and mostly in our urban communities. We serve about 100 girls a day in our out of school time program. And we just recently expanded to do more community-based work in addressing the school to prison pipeline. back in 2016, we realized, we knew that anecdotally there was something going on with our girls, but wanted to really look at the data, because you all know, oftentimes you can, kind of say things are happening, but if you don't have the evidence or data, and nowadays you could even have data and it doesn't make a difference, but people, when you're trying to bring about change or address an issue, you definitely need to have some evidence. And so we looked at our major systems. We looked at our child welfare system, our juvenile justice system. We looked at the school system, and then we looked at some health and wellness outcomes. And not to our surprise, Black girls were the most disenfranchised and overrepresented in a negative way in these systems. And specifically, what was surprising is that in our city and county, Black girls are 10 times more likely than white girls to be referred to the juvenile justice system. The reason why that's disappointing and just egregious, and why we had to move into action to address that, is that nationally, the number is 3 times, right? And so when you look at that large number, that is not indicative of not one girl's behavior or a few girls' behavior. That's a systemic issue, right? And so then that led us to really taking a deep dive into exactly why our girls were being referred, what they were being charged with. And most recently, we found in our report that within our school system, our Pittsburgh public school system, that they were the highest referrers of Black girls to the juvenile justice system. And of those that were referred, 55% were for disorderly conduct charges. So you all are educators, and we've been, looking at the code of conduct, and even within, the criminal justice system, disorderly conduct is that catch-all type of category, where it could be she wouldn't sit in her seat, or she wouldn't turn her cell phone off, or all the, it just gave a way for teachers and school police to be able to, criminalize behavior that we know is adolescent behavior. If it happened in a white school or in a white community, the response is totally different. One of the things that we've been fortunate in Allegheny County is that we do have system administrators that are equally disturbed by the data. The sad thing is that it took us pulling the information and showing it to them before they even recognized that there was this high rate of referral. And so now that they know, they have accepted responsibility and are at the table with us, figuring out what it is that they can do to address the issue. As I said, a lot of times, our young people, as Tanji said, internalize some of the issues that are occurring with them, and believe that they are accountable for some of the actions, but some of the things that our young people are doing are kind of pre-designed to trap them into the system, or to be in a system involved. And so one of the things that we have kind of took on is that we know that our girls need supports. We provide that, but we need to shift this narrative from fixing the girl to fixing the system. And so to do that, it takes courageous conversations and an understanding of what is at the root of this, disproportionate rate of Black children being referred to the system. And for us, it has definitely been understanding the concept of adultification bias, because it is, at the root of the behaviors and things that happen in our schools that, adults will say, you should know better, or you act your age, those types of things, when they really don't, they are acting their age. To be quite honest, they're actually acting the same age as their white counterparts, but being treated in such a different way. And so I had the awesome opportunity to work with Dr. Blake, and she came and did a listening session with our girls. And it was disturbing because, again, we got to see firsthand this internalization about, just some of the policies and practices that they feel are necessary to kind of correct or to monitor or to ensure safety when the policy in and of itself is biased and discriminatory against Black girls. So even when we talk about dress codes and things like that, what we know that even as adults, when you think about when you were in school, there's certain things that we were taught that now we realize that wasn't true. That's not the truth. Right. And so it's been an awesome opportunity for us to actually teach our girls about this concept and give them clear examples and let them reflect on their life and their experiences and understanding of what adultification bias is, and then to be able to call it out. Because if they are equipped with knowledge and even the understanding of what is happening to them, then that internalization of the suspensions and expulsions and everything that Tanji talked about, we see on a daily basis as well. This sexual assaults in school, and most recently Gwen's Girls has gotten involved with trafficking and helping our young girls, and it is so heartbreaking. And it's happening right in front of us, and we don't even know as a community, right? But when you bring it up, it's like, oh, she's fast, she's choosing to do these types of things, and that is far from the truth. So I look forward to answering any questions that the audience may have. I have a quick plug that we have a upcoming summit. It's our 6th annual summit, and we've had address things from the school to prison pipeline, had Dr. Monique Morris be a part of our work. We had Kimberly Crenshaw, Dr. Venus Evans Winters be a part of it. So we have some great history of great speakers. And this year is going to be similar. We have our keynote speaker we have 2 keynote speakers. One will be Dr. Bettina Love, who will talk about this abolitionist teaching and just how we need to shift again our thinking in the framework that and it's timely too. I know this might be a whole nother topic for you, Dr. Brinson, but all this talk about critical race theory and the rhetoric that is happening behind stopping the truth from being taught. Because we all know that we weren't in classes taught about Black history or, just the true history of Africans and Africans in the diaspora. So just looking forward to that. And then we have Dr. Janice Johnson Diaz. She's the mother of Marley Diaz, who has been a phenomenal advocate for young people and is young in her own right, but at like the age of 10 had spearheaded a campaign for young people to read more. And so Dr. Diaz will talk about just parenting. And so that was 2 areas that we at Gwen's Girls and even locally, and I'm sure even a national conversation about how do we better make sure that our children are being educated in a proper way, but then also what is the role of parents and how can parents be more informed and be more engaged in what's happening to our young people in a school setting. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. I'd like to ask is, are there areas of progress that you see, and what are some areas of frustration?
And there's a really good question in the chat, y'all. So we need to bring it up. So are there areas of progress? Well, there was, and then we got hit with these critical race theory bills, and I was like, boy. So I think the progress is that we are having a conversation about Black girls, because for so long, and I think this is really important, not because I'm doing it all sides. A lot of our conversations in the Black community focus on Black males, and we equate that race with the experience of Black males. And this, in no way does talking about Black girls diminish the unique experience of Black males and the importance of the things that our Black males are going through and our Black men go through. But we have been overshadowed, right, by the focus on one gender. And that's where Tanji's point about intersectionality, the connection between racism and sexism come in. So we're having these conversations, and we're getting to a point, and I think this relates a little bit to the chat, where Black men are starting to have this conversation. Because I think Black women we've had these conversations, not using this terminology. You know, I remember my grandma, my mom sitting at the table, you know, cooking Thanksgiving dinner, and they talking about their woes and their experiences. But now these conversations are bringing Black men in. So I think that's good. And people who are not Black are now having to kind of grapple with this concept and wait, do I exhibit this? Is this something that's happening? So we're starting a conversation, and I think that's progress, but that's just the inch, right? The solutions are what my sisters on this panel who are talking about it, you know, and I always like to say, you know, I'm in the ivory tower. So I'm not in, you know, I want to be in the streets. Sometimes I'm in the streets a little bit, you know, I come to Pittsburgh, I'm in the streets with the girls, but I'm not every day in the classroom with you all, right? I'm definitely informed by that, but the real work comes from us as a community creating spaces where we can deliver programs and services to affirm and address the inequities we see. And to have, as Dr. Elliott talked about, these courageous conversations, right? And as Tanji talked about, it's time that we stop putting the responsibility on our youth, and we as the adults, the elders, step up and take some of those blows that our grandparents took. You know, I'm a big Boondocks fan, right? And they say everybody for the civil rights movement act like they was getting sprayed by water, right? And they was getting torn down. Everybody acts like they was part of it when not everybody was. But we tell these stories to our kids and tell them what they need to be standing up for, and they need to have courage, and they need to be the voice, and they do. But we need to really advance these solutions, which means getting to our school boards, getting to our community agencies, talking to our local government, really, and as a single parent, I struggle with this because I get into the hurriedness of life. I'm so focused on gotta get home, cook dinner, get the kids ready, But we really need to be making sure our voice is concerned and pushing, like 1124 and Gwen's Girls and those kind of program individuals who are offering those services forward and integrating those things in our churches, in our schools, in our community, so we can fully support the overall health of all of our children. So that's my thought. Others?
So I'll share that, and thank you for, bringing that up, because one of the things that we know that Black women have not just focused on, historically, not just focused on our needs and the needs of women, but our whole family. And so we are definitely invested in what's happening with Black males, right? And so at Gwen's Girls, when you read one of our reports, it doesn't just highlight what's happening with Black girls. We'll give you everything, every category across, gender and race, so that you can see what's happening with Black males. But even the policy changes that we recommend and that we fight for don't only impact Black girls, but impact all youth, right? And so it's important that, at the forefront, though, our focus is addressing the inequities that Black girls face in our systemic processes that are supposed to protect them. And so part of our solution, again, has been to convene the very people that are in these leadership positions in the system, whether it's the court system, the police, the schools, and then other community members, to come together and develop strategies on addressing these issues. And here in Pittsburgh, we're currently working on a countywide diversion option that, instead of in schools, at home, in the community, when people want to dial 911 because they feel like they don't have no other recourse, that there is another number that they can call to get the supports that they need, because our kids need the supports. The trauma that our kids have experienced in over a lifetime, but just these last 18 months, we can almost predict, once these school doors open, there's going to be a lot of behaviors and a lot of things happening. How adults show up and respond to that is going to be a different story. And I'm hoping that they're prepared to respond in a therapeutic, supportive, trauma-informed way, and not a punitive law enforcement, criminal justice, let's punish them way, which has been how we have always done things. Let's do something different.
And I think a part of that different is actually listening to girls, right? There are all kinds of isms we often discuss. We don't talk about adultism, which is our tendency to put more credence, more weight on things that adults say, even if they're not the ones with the lived experience being affected by it, right? Like a lot of times they can tell you, they have language, they can share experiences with you, but we don't stop and listen to what the girls themselves have to say. And I think we still have room to go when it comes to that.
Yeah.
I'd like to add too, I want to address both questions, because that's some of the work I've been thinking about too. A lot of my work is not solely about Black girls too. I also talk about how Black boys are socialized as well, and how people make assumptions off of Black boys of being more athletic, being thugs, of being dangerous and trouble, and those same messages that Black boys can get can perpetuate those stereotypes and give them false ideas about themselves and other people. So I'm with you. I think it should be both. Some of the work I've done recently is with Northern Kentucky University. They had a project, which I think is a part of the project, a part of the progress that's happening. They had a project where they were trying to put center like Black students in their prevention education efforts on campus. And so I was brought in to help support that process. And what I did was build community. I did some listening sessions, and we had one that was specifically for men. So it was me just kind of sitting in the background, but bringing in male colleagues in, prevention educators, but also folks in the community, people from campus, bringing them in to be able to share space and have this discussion and use that feedback to give to the program so that they're able to center the voices of all Black students and not just go off of like what they think people really feel and experience. And that's why I feel like the more that we can engage in dialogue with each other and use that as our base and learn from each other and look at each other as teachers and learners, the better chance we have of addressing things like adultification bias, but also creating more safe spaces and learning environments for young people.
And can I just do another quick plug for, a program that we have?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And on that note, so we do have some time. So what we want to do as part of our closing remarks, we'll go ahead and start those now. And I appreciate everybody being on. And so what we'll do is anything that you have that you want to put in this space, in this room, the floor is yours, and we'll start with you, Dr. Elliott.
Yeah, so I was just going to add that one of the things that we are intentional about is including the girl's voice. And so we have it's called BAGALA, the Black Girls Advocacy and Leadership Alliance. And that is the kind of sister or the foundation of the work that we are focused on within the Black Girls Equity Alliance. And so over this past summer, we have had an internship and institute, just being in dialogue with our girls and supporting them, and then also just teaching them concepts such as adultification bias. And so the goal is to, have them, instead of me as an adult being on this panel, that I would say, yes, I will come, or I can, have one of my young people be a part of it, because they do have a voice and they have the answers to the solutions to a lot of the different issues that are happening within our systems. And so I encourage school administrators that are on this call, teachers, just to take time to listen, and you will find a whole lot of information and solutions to issues and problems that you feel may be out of your control. And so I'll turn it to, I guess, Tanji, any closing remarks?
Yeah, I would just say thank you again for having me, and for allowing 1124 to have some space. I know that violence prevention education may seem outside of the realm, but it's not, again, because many young people have their first experiences of not only sexual harassment, but interpersonal violence in school, and their partners are there with them. So anytime that we can promote things like identity, we can promote healthy relationships, mutual respect, and even do that by addressing our own biases, we can again make schools safe for young people so they don't find safety outside and through outside means. So please use all the resources that are available to you in your local community. If you don't have prevention educators coming into your schools, definitely please get folks to come into your schools and to partner with outside organizations, because in the domestic and sexual violence movement, we're all having these conversations, and I'm always interested in welcoming to educators and folks who are working with young people every day. So thank you all again.
And you know, I'll just say, when it comes to bias, I don't know that this has been studied yet for adultification bias specifically, but certainly with racial bias, what they find is that it is something that can be addressed and accounted for. But it's easier to do that if you are in a good mental space yourself, right? So as you're trying to address these issues, it's important to put on your own oxygen mask, as they say. In order for you to correct from it, you need to be in a good place. So I know that's easier said than done, especially given what you all are going to be up against this fall. But knowing it's going to be hard, knowing it's going to be a whole lot, means you need to have a whole lot in place in terms of supports, breaks, you know, scheduling downtime for yourself. Like, it is not optional. It shouldn't be optional anyways, but it is not optional this fall. So I would just like to make a plug for self-care and understand that that is not selfish.
Man, I don't really have any closing remarks except that this space filled me up. It was great to hear about all the important work and the insight that the other panelists could offer. I feel invigorated whenever I do these. Not every panel fills me up, but whenever I do these, I feel really good. And I guess what I just want to leave you with is, you know, reach out. You know, I'm trying to look for partners to work with me on. I'm a believer. Like, deep down, I'm a little bit of a pessimist, but deep down, I'm a believer, and I think that we can change the circumstances for our youth, and that involves changing systems, right? And systems, as my good friend Dr. Elliott says, involves people, right? Systems are composed of people, so we can make the change we want to see. So I think you've heard a lot of great resources. I think you've gotten some really good advice. I hope I can speak for everyone when we say that definitely reach out, contact us for potential partnerships, for information. I mean, you can't talk about building community with youth if we're not willing to be a community, right? So, you know, part of being Black is this concept of communalism, right? So let's build this community, let's support each other, let's reach out and make sure that, you know, programs that are meant to support and affirm Black children are the ones that are getting implemented in your schools and in your communities by people who are really invested in the growth of your children, right, in our children. So that's what I'll end with, and I thank you for the time and the invitation.
I want to thank you all as well. This has been very, very powerful and informative and invigorating as well. And we look forward to continuing the work. And this is for each of you. Anything that you need for the Black Caucus to do, we are more than willing to partner. And if we can't partner, we'll find someone that can. So, you know, feel free to share. I think I shared some of the information with everyone, but feel free to share any contacts, any links, anything that you want me to distribute to the membership, as far as emails, registration links, you know, how to donate to your work, anything of that nature. Just feel free to reach out to me, and I will help you get in touch with the right people. And again, so grateful each of you accepted the invitation and were able to attend tonight. So thank you again so much.
Thank you for having us.